Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining.
All right, nice.
There's loads of us on the call, so we're live now, Warren and Rob.
Hi guys.
Super exciting. Thank you so much for joining, and apologies for moving the date, but couldn't be helped. So I'm just going to do a quick intro, and then I'm going to hand over to Rob to share his screen. But yeah, so it's Thursday, 6 p.m. in the UK, 18th of December, nearly Christmas. And we've got a really exciting CPD lined up this evening. And Warren and Rob are going to take us through some really great tips on how to avoid ski injuries. But prior to starting that, I'm going to do my little spiel about scan.com. So Scan, as some of you will know, we're like a diagnostic infrastructure partner, a bit like booking.com. We support online booking of scanning all types of diagnostics across the UK. You can access a scan by going onto our website and typing in your postcode and selecting an MRI or whatever scan you like, and you can book online, and you can also receive your results online. We've done away with paper, with CDs, and we also produce really great reports that explain your pathologies very simply so that your patients or you can understand them. So that's my 1 second on scan. Basically, the main goal of tonight is to allow Warren to take you through some of his philosophy and training on ski injuries and how to avoid them, and the biomechanics of skiing. And the best way that these run is if you interrupt and ask questions, you can drop them in the chat. I'm also going to be polling you a little bit during the session, but I think be as interactive as possible because that's the best fun. Great. And if you do want to, if you want to, afterwards, we'll send you a form. You can fill out some feedback, and we'll also send you a certificate of CPD. So for your continuous professional development. So send us an email afterwards. And that's it. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Warren. Warren is a friend. He is the founder of Warren Smith Ski Academy, a legend in the local ski town of Verbier, and he's a professional skier and coach, an amazing coach. He's able to break down skiing into really understandable bite-sized learning points to kind of improve anyone on the slopes. And I'm delighted that he's here this evening to take us through some of his philosophy of skiing. And I really hope you enjoy this presentation. He's also got Rob with him. Rob, please do introduce yourself as well. Don't have a slide on you, so I apologize for that. And if you want to take control of the screen now, I will stop sharing myself as well.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for inviting us, Lizzie. That's really kind. We're sort of honoured to speak to your community. And as Lizzie was explaining, what me and Rob do quite often, for example, when we're in the UK in October, is we present to various types of organisations, whether it's gyms or medical institutions or ski instructors themselves, but also the main core general consumer skiing public, a methodology we've created called Ski Technique Lab. And one of the key aspects is obviously what tonight's talk is about is injury prevention, how injuries occur. Me and Rob have seen 25 years of it on the slopes here in Verbier and further afield. And we've sort of managed to formulate a biomechanical structure to do with functional movement patterns that really hugely avoid the risk of injury. They lower the risk of injury, but they also create a better learning curve in the world of skiing. And that's what we have sort of come here to talk about tonight. So we have a methodology. I know Rob's got some scans and some slides that we'll be able to use and show you. Some of you guys, I'm sure out there, may have seen what we do and may have even come to some of the talks. And some of you guys may have also been on the ski courses. But in terms of your industry and how you guys are interacting with skiers, I think it's a really important thing to recognize. We work very closely with the ski retail industry, and we also work very closely with the medical industry. We've spent many years working with the Fortius and other surgeons and specialists and physios regarding skiing. And one of the things that's always come to mind in how we coach the sport is Yeah, and we often use this analogy actually that so many people can book a ski lesson, so many people can book on our classic 5 day course. But if we can get to those people 6, 7, 8 weeks before they come out, we get a chance to unlock the left and right side of the body imbalances. So when me and Rob and the rest of the team are running an academy course, there is a certain percentage of things we know we can do to change a person's skiing. But there is probably, 30, 40% of things we can't do on a 5 day course because of physiological blocks or locks, you could call it, differences between left and right side of the body. And quite often when injuries occur, you will normally find that when someone skis, and any of you guys listening to this, and feel free to ask, more detailed questions about it, but nearly every skier will be able to turn around to you and say, yes, I know I have a weaker turn direction. An example today, I was coaching in Verbier up on a mountain called Mont Gelais, and it's got quite a steep entry. And the people I was traversing in with we were quite lucky actually. We traversed in, and the turn direction we had to make our first turn in was both of their right hand turns. Their left turn wasn't their stronger turn. And if you're a skier and you know what this feels like, it usually relates back to a biomechanical imbalance between a steering action in the legs, and that's what the ethos of what we want to talk about tonight is. We also think it's really important, especially from the medical industry, to take a closer look, whatever you do, in the equipment setup of a skier. So we are trying to create, and we'd love your feedback on it. And it's that's why we feel very privileged to be invited into Liz's community. But we're creating a system called Skier ID Passport, and the Skier ID Passport will be launched next year. Very happy to share this with you guys online. And what it is that we want it to become the norm for every skier to have a video of themselves skiing. So when they walk into a ski shop, whether it's a big consumer like Snow and Rock or Profi or wherever you may go in the UK, we want people to go one stage further than those awkward questions of how do you ski? What's your skiing level? And where some people play themselves down, and some people over exaggerate and say they're amazing at skiing, and they might not be. So we would like people to have a really standardized video of themselves skiing, and use that. For example, when you book on a ski course with us, it's great for us to know what level someone is by visually watching them. It's great for a boot fitter, and the ski boot fit is probably one of the most important things in terms of, again, avoiding injury, to make sure that boot is fitted correctly. But when someone walks into a shop, there is that question as to how good someone is at skiing. So that's one of the things we wanted to sort of raise tonight about what we're developing, because I think it's important for you guys in your industry to sort of be involved in this actually. And I would love that to come out of the back of the conversation tonight, that people in your world would have opinions on it. So we will definitely be open to continuing that conversation after tonight. Talking on that, you can see, as you see, the three pillars of what we talk about: technique, biomechanics, and equipment. The key for us really is the biomechanical element, and the biomechanical element is something that goes kind of way bigger than what we are as ski coaches. In the three bubbles you see, the two that come before technique, biomechanics, and equipment are the most important to make us be able to do our job correctly. So if someone turns up on a ski course in Verbier and their boots are slightly too big, or they're not fitted correctly, or they're struggling with the flex index of the boot, or it could be that the ski length isn't the correct length, or the ski's too stiff or too soft for them, it will greatly affect how our job goes. But the bigger picture, obviously, for us, which is why it relates to you guys in your industry, is biomechanics. So about 20 years ago, to sort of give you the backstory, about 20, maybe even longer, maybe 20, 25 years ago, on academy courses we were running, we used to always do a video analysis night, and we still do. And on the video analysis night, people would show us typically an on-piste run and an off-piste run. And on the on-piste run, it became really apparent to the whole room that was watching the video that someone would come down making medium radius turns. And on one turn direction, they had a very good ability to steer their legs in one direction, and on the other direction, their whole body would rotate. And to us, when we sort of scratched beneath the surface or looked closer at the physiology, it was to do with leg steering. And to put a more detailed analysis on that, it's leg steering, but it's the inner leg steering of the outside leg. So, for example, if a ski instructor is screaming at someone about finish off your turns, and it's a really common thing in skiing to finish off your turns, you need it. And if someone goes off piste or into a steeper terrain, quite often where injuries occur is when a skier is taken to an environment where they're struggling. You know, the steeper the slope gets, the more technically challenging it is. And you'll often find that most injuries, and statistically injuries, will creep up when someone gets taken into a steeper run, a black run, or an off-piste environment. And on the leg steering range, you can even see it written in our Ski Technique Lab manual. The leg steering range, usually, and me and Rob have, we've gone through over 10,000 people on the testing of this. And leg steering range is basically when we look at someone turning towards the right, we test and we hold their hips and we see how far their left leg can inwardly rotate to the right. And if I have to sort of use this as an average or just a general point, let's say that after our tour in October and the London Ski Show, we would roughly gauge that most of the people we tested were 60 to 70 degrees going towards the right. This is a very general analysis of it. And they were sort of 30, 40 degrees going towards the left. So the right leg's ability to inwardly rotate towards the left. And when we try and teach someone to ski, you can imagine our frustration when there's a physiological block. So in the physiological block of that, on, let's say, the right leg's ability to only steer 30 degrees towards the left, they are going to hip rotate. Now, when a skier hip rotates, their whole body rotates. It flattens the downhill ski. They lose, control of the turn. But the worst thing is, and this is why it's really interesting to ski injuries, is when they only have 30 degrees of rotation on, let's say, the right leg going left, their whole trunk, their upper body, their hips rotate, and they dump body weight on their inside ski. And when they dump body weight on their inside ski, it's an unexpected calculation. So quite often knee injuries will happen when someone's going through a turn and they're trying to control speed with their outside leg and they're steering, but they've actually rotated their upper body and their hips, and they put so much pressure unexpectedly through the inside leg. And that leg can buckle, that leg can take pressure, it can hit a roller, it can get submerged or whatever. And you often find that a lot of the results of an injury are that. So that's one subject that we have statistically got lots and lots of data on, and it's the data that we would obviously love to share with you guys. So leg steering range, it's a big thing for us. We did it at the London Ski Show. We had a conveyor belt, you could say, of a queue outside the stand where people were like, 10 years ago, Ski Technique Lab, it was known, but it was known sort of in an inner circle and an industry circle, and ski boot fitters that were quite specialized knew about it. But now commercially, and this is what might be quite interesting for you guys. Only this week we signed a contract with Crystal Holidays, and Crystal Holidays are obviously a very commercial brand, and perhaps we're quite a specialist brand, but the alignment of it for us is to have access and exposure to 570,000 British skiers. So they hold the biggest card of how someone would book a holiday. And our goal in the next year is to try to change the way British skiers ski. And it obviously goes beyond the UK. But let's say for the reason of this talk tonight, if we can access that many skiers and give them, let's say, an 8-week program before they go on a ski holiday, we know that we can change quite a lot about this. So what Rob's showing you right now on the screen is a leg steering range test. It's how we would do the test. We hold someone's hips, we ask them to step left and right, and that's where we usually see the biggest difference. There's a QR code on that as well, and we'll be happy to share with you the document tonight. But the tests come up with a really obvious thing, which is when you question someone in day-to-day life of, like, you're about to clip onto your ski bindings in not an alien sport. You know, we've got loads of people here this week that'll be skiing 3, 4, 5 weeks a season. But how often in day-to-day life, when you're trying to avoid an injury, do you have to, do you want to, or do you, even are you required to make an inner rotation, not of the inside leg, that one's easy, but an inner rotation of your outside leg? And it's quite a blocked environment. But most people, when we've been on our tour and talks and anything we do, medical industry included, there isn't really many sports you do where you're actively required to make an inner rotation of your outside leg. Skiing as a sport, to do it technically correct, you need 70 degrees of rotation one way and 70 degrees the other. And as we just spoke about, if you're blocked on one, the hip will follow you. And the hip following you, especially in a tight corridor, the short game, those type of environments, steep slopes, short radius turns, moguls. When you don't have that ability to rotate your outside leg, the hip will follow and you'll displace what would be a calculated pressure on your outside ski. It'll get dumped on the inside ski. So we know very well that quite a lot of knee injuries will happen for that reason. It's a really core reason. The exercises, which is why we've teamed up. I mean, some of you guys might not know, but we're the ski technique editors for the Ski Club of Great Britain, which is Ski and Board magazine, also crosses over into Full Line magazine. We do these talks at various ski shops, but we get exposure nowadays, and people are listening to it. So from our point of view, we think, we're not professionals, perhaps like you guys are in the medical world. We work with professionals, but if you simply held your hips, spent 2 minutes every day for 3 or 4 weeks practicing inner rotation of your outside leg, you would free up the joint because it's not worked upon in day-to-day life. Yet, as we was talking about, when you clip into your skis on a Sunday morning until Friday afternoon, you're required to steer this range. So from our point of view, I guess we've got so close to this because of frustration of wanting to improve people's skiing. Me and Rob and the rest of the academy team, we're quite geeky. We love what we do as a job, and we get right into it. And we would love everyone to turn up on a ski course with us and be able to have free range of movement. And let's say it's not idealistic, right? So let's say that someone could go 70 degrees one way to the right and 40 turned into 50 or 60 degrees to the left. That would make a huge impact on how we teach. It would have a very big impact on injury prevention. So that's one subject that for us we're very passionate about exposing it. Rob can probably take you actually to the section here on the video. The what we've got on the leg steering range, ski asymmetry, which we'll get to in a second. But the leg steering range, there's an interesting shot at the start of this, which is a no fall zone shot, and in a commercial that we did for Vocal. It's just up on the Triant Glacier, just opposite Verbier, and I did a ski run. They took pictures of it and they published it in a poster. But the more important thing for us as a company is that in making these turns, especially when you're above a no fall zone, this is where it really counts. And to put it in a consumer thing is when someone goes and traverses into an off-piste area where you're starting to get the jitters, you're sort of slightly nervous. The people I was skiing with today, they were definitely nervous. We went into the Montgelé run and they were like, their performance changed, and their nerves kicked in because they didn't have that full range of movement on the left and right. And there are workarounds. So as coaches, we will always have a workaround for anything like that. And you can make a turn with hip rotation and it will still work. But on here, from a leg steering range point of view, you can see where a turn has to be finished. You have to get to an S shape. If on that turn that Rob's paused it on, I rotated my hips, I would have definitely lost the grip of my outside ski. It would have thrown my whole balance off. And in that type of gradient that you're looking at, you can't afford to have a slight error. On an itinerary run in Verbier, you can. On an itinerary run in Verbier, you can make some mistakes. On a red run, you can get away with quite a lot. On a blue run, you've probably got no problem or risk of injury. On here, you can see Jordan from our team making really good functional movement patterns with his leg. He's turning left, he's turning right, and you can see the zip of the jacket facing towards the camera. Now, as he continues to make his turns and comes through, you'll see that he develops and blends this leg steering function into what will eventually be carved turns. But what's really interesting for us to show you guys watching on leg steering range, we'll show you some recreational skiers, and this will be classic of what you'll receive in your industry. This is a beginner intermediate skier loving his skiing. Most important thing for him is he makes it to après ski and he has a really good lunch and he loves the sport and he's like, wow, I want to come back skiing again. So this guy, doesn't matter to us that his technique is not amazing. He's just getting started. But when you watch a rotation, you can see the whole trunk of the body rotates. Leg steering range hasn't really woken up yet for this person. That being said, when I was running a ski course this summer at the indoor snowdome at Hemel, before the course we run for the Ski Club of Great Britain, a journalist was sitting there saying, "Oh, your stuff, yeah, it's just for advanced skiers, it's just for experts or instructors." And I was like, "Actually, it's really not." And we were lucky enough. I was lucky enough to have the journalist conversation, sitting there talking to someone, and Hallie Hansen had sent someone to interview us to talk about Ski Technique Lab, and there was a beginner lesson going on in the indoor snowdome in Hemel. And at the indoor snowdome, we were watching this beginner lesson. I said, this is so not just about level of skiing. It's about every skier, every skier's functional movement pattern. Watch these guys. And they were actually just literally going from snowplow to snowplow turning. And I said, if you watch this lot, they're all going to favor one side and they're all going to get stuck on the other. And sure enough, they were going down their snowplow, as I'm sure you guys are aware, and they made their snowplow turn in one direction, and in the other direction, whether it was intrinsic, whether it was purely physical or psychological, they went to go the other way, and it was like the whole body got rotated and thrown in the other direction. And we watched 8 people do exactly the same thing where they favored one side. And as the conversation grew, it was really clear that it matters. It matters to every person that skis. So a beginner should be privy to this information, not just intermediates or advanced or experts or instructors. It's just a really basic movement that we should all be aware of because we can fix it and it doesn't take rocket science. And it's also information that you guys listening to this tonight can easily adapt and take on board. This guy's interesting. So if you watch this next turn, it's his rotational turn. Look at his hands when he finishes the turn. Look at his hip rotation. Look where his body is facing and his outside leg has locked out. Can you all see that? It's like a really unstable, quite an unsafe position. Now, when we tested this guy on the test that you saw on the slide earlier, where Rob showed you, his right leg's ability to turn and rotate and step around to the left was 25 degrees. Now, if you watch his next turn and his natural turn, his left leg had the ability to go to 70. And you can see in the setup of the turn, the height of the hands, everything is really symmetrical. It's really comfortable and it's safe. It's physiologically safe. And there's a really interesting lady here that comes down. So this one's quite good because she turns and makes a really nice setup to the turn. Her hips are facing down the fall line. Everything's good to go. But that right ski, if she wants to control the speed in that couloir, she's got to steer that right ski 70 degrees or 80 towards the left. Now, when we tested her right leg's ability to go towards the left, she had 30 degrees. And the left leg's ability was 70. So this just gives you a very brief overview of left and right imbalances. When you watch what happens next, she comes around in the turn, she tries to finish the turn. And if you take this back slowly, sort of through the movement pattern, sort of frame by frame, you'll see that her hip rotation as we go through, and we'll do it frame by frame. If you look at her pelvic girdle, there's the rotation. She's getting the ski around to 70 degrees, but to do so, she hit the 30-degree wall, and then the hip had to rotate to get the ski to the end. Now, as she goes through further, she gets to a point where she's treading on the left ski. The height difference between the left hand and right hand is almost 1 meter. And as with that, you can really see now why we don't want the blockage between left and right in a leg rotation of the outside leg. So this for us is interesting. As she carries on, she goes through the turn, She's actually safe. She's wearing a backpack, all the rest of the protection that you'd expect. And she gets back up on her feet, brushes herself off, and she's away. But that was caused a lot. And she changed that. This person, fanatical skier, loves the sport, but look at the next turn paused. Now, this turn is her left leg's ability to inwardly rotate to the right. The body setup is different. Everything is different in the way the stance works, the protection of how alignment works in the legs, and how you would prevent injury. So it's really, it's interesting to watch. Here's another turn, so towards the left, where she's doing the same. She's hip rotated. She's trod on the inside leg. There is quite a severe height difference between left and right hand, and there's a vulnerability in the skeleton. So from that point of view, that's our first subject to talk about. And you might think we've elaborated on it quite a lot and we've talked a lot, but the reality of it is, if you want to get to the gist of how this sport works and understanding it, and work closer with clients that may pay a visit to you guys or work with physios you work with or anything else, if you have an understanding, and we do this, we take people through a qualification. We do it in the Verbier International School here with the kids in the class. We do it with Ski Club Great Britain reps. We try to educate instructors as well to be further educated. But the great thing about Ski Technique Lab is a family with their own kids or groups of friends that ski or work together, reading up on the literature information, you can actually become quite a good ski coach, quite knowledgeable. So that's why we didn't want to rush over that subject. But the other interesting one for you guys, going back to point number one, I don't want to just talk sort of, talk away without breathing. So if anyone wants to ask questions, if Lizzie, if you want to jump in and share any questions people have asked, I've sort of got my screen up, but it's mainly sharing what Rob's got here. But has anyone got any questions on any of the points we've just made on that subject?
We haven't had any questions so far, but if we do get some, oh, here we go. There's one come in. I'll read it to you. One sec. Can I ask how this range and flexibility of the leg steering range influence on the gradient?
Hmm.
As when you turn on a gradient, the pelvis will be at an angle too.
Yeah, the pelvis will be at an angle, hopefully roughly matching what the gradient of the slope will be. But this is not the side on angle. This is to do with how you'd be positioned on that gradient. So when you want to finish off a turn and get good edge grip and be in balance and everything be quite symmetrical, and like you just said, where the pelvis sits at the right angle, you don't want the pelvis to be forced into rotation because the leg couldn't steer you towards the end of the turn. So the key for this is, yeah, the point is correct. The pelvis will roughly be on the angle of the gradient of the slope, to a degree. Depends on what type of turn you're making. If it's a short radius turn in a narrow corridor, the pelvis is going to be mainly facing down the hill. If you're making bigger, medium, or longer turns, the pelvis will steer to a degree across the hill with the person making those turns. But the core element of leg steering has to come from the leg. And when the pelvis starts to get involved because it was forced to, that's where things become a little bit different. And everyone should, in theory, know that when they know that they've got a difference between the left and right turning direction. I'm going to go on to a point that I think is quite interesting for you guys, which is our first point, to do with ankle flex range. And this does relate as well, especially, in the industry you guys are in, or if you see a lot of, knee injury issues or anything that comes out of it. But skiing, if we're kind of point blank about it, a lot of skiing injuries are knee related. In the old days, it used to be because bindings weren't efficient, didn't work as effectively. Now they work fantastically. But quite often, you find someone in the sport of skiing putting way too much torque through the knee joint when they're going through the subject we previously just spoke about, the leg steering range subject. So you're watching a guy here. This is our classic example. So he's making his ski turns and he's coming through the turns. And on this turn here, at the point of just going back a couple of frames, he goes through a turn. And if we pause it on the point, he will make an error where he comes through and you can see him clearly backseat. Now, in that backseat position, it's not great for the knee joint when you're making turns. He's not a bad skier. He's an intermediate, advanced intermediate. But it's interesting that we use Ski Technique Lab as a methodology, which is what anyone listening to this talk can do when you go away and read the manual, of how to analyze this. So if you've got a skier whose ski tips are coming off the ground, And we'll show you in a little while, not yet, but we'll show you in a little while that this guy will go off piste, he'll ski in powder. We didn't take him somewhere steep, we took him somewhere quite achievable. But his ski tips are lifting off the ground, and he's got something clearly going on with his left hand turn. If you show him your right hand turn, so in the next turn that he makes, it's a very different picture. He comes through, we'll pause it at the same point, and he's got a really lovely flex pattern between the ankle, the knee, and the hip. And you can see there where Rob's putting the cursor on him. Ski tips nicely in contact with the snow. So from our point of view as coaches, we'd have to look at it from a point of view like what's going on here, physiologically. There's obviously either a blockage in his ski boot. There is a difference in his flexibility in the ankle. Could be to do with his calf. It could to be to do with a various few things. But when we take this further, we did a couple of tests on the guy. So first thing we look at is his ski boot. And on his ski boot, every ski boot that you buy has a DR rating. The ones me and Rob skiing are like 130, 140 type boots. We'll show you this guy again, just pausing it there is lift off of the ski. So in slow motion, you can clearly see he's going back seat on his left-hand turn. As he carries on through, he will make the same turn, but in a really well-balanced position. What me and Rob did at lunchtime is we checked his boot. So the DR rating I was talking about is he was in a 100 flexing boot. Now, if he'd have brought a boot that was top of the shelf, it was all red and looked great, which used to happen 20 years ago. You can see what happens here in powder. And this is where things do get interesting from an injury point of view. Look at how much that's exaggerated because the terrain is a bit more difficult. There's no room for correction. There's no room to skid your ski out to break your speed. He's now gone very backseat, and his knee joint won't like that. Comes onto his next turn, and by the time he's gone through, he's lost control. It's not like a downhill mountain bike, and he's happy. He's fallen in snow. But what I can say about that guy is we checked his boot. His boot flex matched his body weight. His body weight was roughly 75 kilos. And when you look at someone who's 75 kilos, the body weight should be roughly in that sort of 100 DR flex boot range. People I was skiing today, they were in a 90 and an 80 flex boot range. They were sort of 60 kilos and 55 kilos. And you match boot range flex with how it works on your ability, your technical ability, and your physiology. So because we had a really good result with his ski boots and the boot was fitted very well, we went to the next part. We sort of took his boots off at lunchtime in Verbier in a restaurant called Runette. It's just our classic sort of meeting place during a course. And we did a very quick test with him. We did a test where we took a ruler, put it on the floor, and we measured his ability to make a forward flexing range from his ankle joint, and seeing how far away from the wall this flex movement pattern worked. And on his right leg, he gained a pretty appalling flex range of 6 centimeters. You can see us here doing the test. On his left leg, where he makes his great turn, his left leg was his outside leg, his downhill ski leg, and he got to 16 centimeters. So between 6 centimeters and 16 centimeters, we knew there was an issue. But the issue for us was not something a ski instructor can fix during a 5-day course. You can't do that in that space of time.
Warren, just for clarity, which is the angle that you're measuring on this picture? Maybe
So if you look from the ankle up to the knee joint, we are just
yeah,
measuring that lower leg's ability to flex forward.
nice.
Yeah, so the lower leg's ability to flex forward, if it doesn't happen or work very well in ski boots and skiing, the knee joint will overflex and compensate. And if the knee joint overflexes, as you just saw with that guy, it will put dorsiflexion. It will put an incredible amount of tension through the knee joint. And because of that, obviously the guy had an issue that we couldn't fix on a 5-day course. He went away in January, came back in end of March, and it was completely fixed. He went from 16 on one side, which we already knew, to 14 on the other side by simple calf stretching and mobility exercises. And he put himself in a much safer space to perform the sport of skiing. But so many people that we test on our tour when we're interacting with the general public really do have these issues. So we have a rough sort of scale. If someone scores between 0 and 8, and trust me, we've had scores of 3, 4, and 5 on this year's tour from many people, 0 and 8 is the red zone. So 0 and 8 is something where you need to get attention, probably medically, something working with the physio, whatever it might be. 8 to 12 is kind of like a bit of an amber zone. It's like somewhere where we think just, this person is okay, but they will definitely be inhibited. We would prefer they got beyond 12. And the reason we say that is because if you were skiing somewhere, let's say in flat light, like we did yesterday, up in a place called Col de Joncy on flat light, and there's moguls, and you're not quite sure what you're hitting underfoot. Or if you're just going off piste and joining a path, you can sometimes get a compression. We want to know, as ski coaches, that our people physically skiing with us, if they had the unexpected, and this is why it's really interesting for you guys listening, is that skiing and golf are quite different. Golf is a very predictable sport. You're static, you're standing still, and you're doing something you're preconceiving everything of. Whereas skiing is 50% action, but it is also 50% reaction because we're skiing on a mountain that is forever changing, that we don't always know what's around the corner, which is why injuries are more apparent in a sport like this. So in the amber zone, someone is going to be probably okay, but we want people in the green zone. Green zone is from 12 to 20 centimeters on the test. And in the green zone, you're going to be pretty assured that if you hit the unexpected, a compression that you weren't expecting, and your boot got flexed unexpectedly to its max, you're not going to stress out the back of your leg. You're not going to incur an injury. You're probably going to be a better person that skis in control. But there's a really interesting point about this is that when you ski, you spend most of your ski life skiing at an average speed on piste around 30 miles an hour, 20, 30 miles an hour. And when you make those turns, it's a bit like being in a car going around the roundabout with a load of people in the back of the car. If you go around a roundabout and you turn, the force pushes people to one side of the car. And in ski boots, that's called assisted force. So it helps someone flex that ski boot when they're making their calf turns. You get a bit of pressure and it's really a nice feeling. But if you're at the top of the place I went skiing today, Montgelé, and you're trickling in at 2 miles an hour, 3 miles an hour if you're lucky, because you're being cautious, because it's steep, you get no assisted force. And that individual has to manually flex the boot to create reaction. Now, if that individual's got the score between 0 and 8, they're not going to flex the boot. They're going to be back seat and they're going to be way more inclined to injury. The amber zone 8 to 12, it's an interesting zone. We want it to be improved, but you'll probably get away with it. And the green zone is someone that will have the physical ability to manually flex and dominate their ski boot at low speed. So it's an interesting area to talk about, but we know as coaches we would prefer if everyone had way more awareness in the first place. Even if they've got a good range, doesn't always mean they've got good stability of flex. Sometimes, we've got someone who has a 20 centimeter flex against the wall. You put them on a yoga block and ask them to flex forward, and their knees sort of wobbling like this on one leg, and the other leg stable. So, it's an interesting subject to sort of explore. And once you explore it and scratch the surface, we've made better relationships with ski shops. We sort of work very closely with boot fitters, and we can help educate people to do off snow exercises before they come skiing, and they will greatly reduce the risk of injury. Um, so yeah, if anyone's got any questions on ankle flex, range, ski boots, we'll be really happy to speak about them now and answer them. And our last subject we're going to talk about is ski asymmetry again, which is a big question mark for ski injury.
I've got a couple. One of them you've answered, which is the ideal score, which I've written as between 12 and 20 centimeters for ankle flex.
Yeah.
And then there was another one. Have you used a knee to wall measure to assess the liability to ankle flex before boot fitting and skiing? That's presumably what we've just been talking about.
Yeah, it's a really good point, actually. In fact, the way that ski boot fitters are evolving, and this is it's not necessarily new, but it's always been like the specialist boot fitters. Some of you guys might know the shop called Profeet on the Fulham Road. Now, Profeet have been doing these type of tests for a long time. A shop like Profeet makes the effort with their staff to come out and actually ski with us in Verbier. They book a ski week with us. We train the staff. They get a much greater understanding of the relationship between coaching and the clients, consumers. There's other people in the UK like Solutions for Feet, another great boot fitting outfit. And you got Rivington Alpine. Graham was out here 2 weeks ago. You may have seen in our Facebook post that we did. Graham actually interacted with one of our ski coaching sessions, and it was brilliant. It was like, a client of mine. He just happened to be a guy called Harvey Sinclair. He runs a company called E Energy. We work closely with E Energy because I'm an ambassador for Protect Our Winters. And E Energy are the guys, if you don't know, they just put the solar panels on top of the snow centre in Hemel. Really great bunch. They're about to do the same at the Chill Factory of the Northern Snow Centre. And Harvey had an issue with his boots, which I was working on some exercises. But having Graham, the boot fitter on the mountain in Verbier, his daughter's actually doing our level 3 ski instructor training. So he was out visiting his daughter. We stopped off at lunchtime. He did some adjustments to the boots. And it was, I was doing my best job, but having a boot fitter that really knew about engineering and biomechanics made such a difference. And I would really stress that, from an injury prevention point of view and working with experts in your field, what we've learned is that inside a shop, there could be an expert. Who do you go? You go to the brand. Let's say the brand is Ellis Brigham or something. Right. There might be one person that we recommend, and it could be in that shop at that place. But one of the things we'd be very open to doing, with you guys or working closely with you guys, is to put you in touch with people that we know have biomechanics expertise and experience when it comes to the boot fitting job. Could be to do with the footbed, could be to do with the cuff alignment, certainly to do with the flex of the boot. And that's really important. And it also kind of leads on to our last point to talk about, which is ski asymmetry. Sorry.
There was just a couple of questions. It actually goes back to the rotation.
Yeah.
Do you have a way of measuring the internal rotation of the hip?
Yeah, we do. We do. So what we use is we use a kind of like a semicircle. What do you call it? The degrees, 0 to 90 degrees each way. So 0 to 90 degrees each way. If you ever want to do that test, it's really easy. So basically, if you're on a wooden floor or a tiled surface, most of the surfaces that you stand on have lines in them. And what we do is when we stand someone up to have 1 foot either side, we get them in the middle of the line. And a really clear mark is made that that is 0 degrees. And when you step around, you can sort of map out what 45 degrees looks like. And you can certainly map out, because it's absolute sideways, what 90 degrees looks like. Our goal is obviously 70. So we actually make these boards. We took them, on our tour, took them to the London Ski Show, and they're very effective. They're an eye opener. And we do the same on that board. We have a red zone, an amber zone, and a green zone. Green zone is when you're sort of hitting 70. But most people, and this is why we want people to share our information, look at the exercises, go on our YouTube channel, go on the Ski Technique Lab on our website, and actually see it. Because when you watch the videos, they're not subscription based; they're free. You would easily be able to do this with your partner, your buddies, your children, people you like skiing with. Do the test at home. It's really not difficult. You put your hands on your colleague's hip, you hold the hip and the pelvic girdle, and you don't allow the pelvis to rotate. And quite quickly, you'll see, and I'll challenge anyone to do this and write back and feed back into the chat. See your results. You will always normally see a 20 to 30 degree difference between left and right on nearly everybody.
Really interesting. And the other question on the hip rotation was, so do the problems generally relate to if they're left or right dominant in terms of
Yeah, yeah. Do you know what? It's an interesting one. We don't quite know the answer to that. One of them is the point blank of who we're talking to tonight. That like an industry involved in the medical world and involved in injury prevention. So the injury prevention side of things, a lot of people along the way have picked up injuries, right? So a lot of people have at certain points in life had a thing where they've hobbled around on one leg or the other. Um, I think a lot of people are dominant, and it could be to do the left and right side of the brain or physiological imbalances. I think, take it away from skiing. If you stuck someone in a car going through loads of chicanes in a Ferrari, whatever, they were just going through, they would probably be better going one way than the other, because the brain would be more, accurate going one way to the other. We know that people, as kids, don't have this imbalance, and as people grow older into their teens and into their 20s, it starts to form itself. If any of you guys listening tonight walk into a bar, and buy a drink and you stood there absolutely even on both feet, you'd probably get thrown out of the bar for looking like a bit of a weirdo. The point of it is we don't stand like that. We don't act like that. We always sort of do and prefer one side of the body. So from a point of view of getting to the bottom of what it is, it's still an ongoing question for us. And it's really good to have medical brains looking at it. But we know that most people's hips into their 20s to 30s are not aligned. You know, the pelvic girdle is not symmetrical. It usually falls out of alignment, and it favors one side or the other, which might lead to all sorts of other complications, which I won't get into tonight. But everyone might know that on the left and right side of the body, you've got your SI joint at the back that can feel tight on one side, and we pick up these things along on the journey in life. You know, that's the functional movement patterns that we want to work evenly. They generally don't. But when you're made aware of it, you can make changes, like good enough changes to make the sport of skiing work well and to reduce the risk of injury.
Thank you.
So shall I talk about the last subject, or is that time
Yeah,
as our time clock up?
I think we've got time.
I'll whiz through it.
Read
I'll
through
do a
it. Yeah.
brief overview. So basically, ski asymmetry. Most people, and this is an interesting point. If anyone does ski here, do it on your next ski holiday. If anyone's going to the indoor snow dome at Hemel or wherever you are, most skiers ski in an A-frame. Some are more extreme than others, but most people's legs are not aligned. Showing you the A-frames, you can see Rob and Jordan here in our team. If you pause it, there's always a nice even link between the ball and socket joints, the knees, and the ankles. I'll pause it on Rob's next turn, and you'll see it really clearly as he comes through. He's making his turn, and that is symmetry. Perfect. Two skis at the same angle. That'll be the same if you dipped Rob into really heavy slush, really horrible powder, wind crust snow. The symmetry will keep his skis tracking at the same angle. Now, if you watch the next few skiers, I'm going to show you a couple of different A-frames. A-frames are caused for mainly three different reasons. This first guy is caused his A-frame by a kink in the outside leg. So when he makes his next turn, as he skis through, he'll make a turn towards the left. And if you look at the outside leg, but pause it, he's got no leg extension. And I won't get too technical as a ski coach because, you know, you guys aren't ski coaches, but that guy there needs to extend his right leg, a bit like doing a leg press in the gym, more. And he will get rid of that kink and it will get rid of the A-frame. But you can also see what the A-frame's done. It's made his right knee vulnerable, but he's also dumped loads of weight on his inside leg. He sort of broke his symmetry. Skeleton's struggling, and his muscles are definitely under stress. The second A-frame is something to do with equipment. So the second person coming down the slope, she was on a gap year course. Basically, most of this run, she is just in an A-frame. But she's a sports teacher, does lots of active sports, triathlon, things like that. But we asked ourselves, hang on a sec, this person's got a great capability to do sport at a high level and understand sport, but she couldn't get out of the A-frame. So from our point of view as coaches, the A-frame, and I just see what someone wrote there, the A-frame is the asymmetric angle, and you can actually see the letter A between her knees and her feet. You could flip it on its head and call it the V shape or the V frame. But the reality of it is that's an A frame and it's asymmetric. You know, she's not symmetrical between her ball and socket joints and knees and her feet. The obvious thing from an injury point of view is stress on your MCL, stress on the inside of the knee, meniscus areas. It's going to put the knee under stress because the sport's unpredictable. If she hits something at that angle, we know what's going to happen. Could be a micro injury. Micro injuries are interesting. It could be a major injury, but micro injuries go sort of seen. What she needed to fix her skiing was a footbed inside a ski boot that supported her skeleton. She got the footbed in. Once the footbed was in the boot, skeleton was adjusted, and it all sort of worked. Everything was hunky dory. So that's one thing about the equipment being very important. The last point, the same person, funny enough, but she's killing it. You know, this is like a week later. But once her footbeds were put in, she really went through, she passed her instructor's course, but she's making another type of A-frame because of the scar tissue, you could call it, of her inside leg. So as she comes through the turn, just here in the turn, she didn't adjust. She's got a brilliant leg extension. So that guy who came first on this explanation had a terrible outside leg extension. Hers is of excellence. She's made a brilliant left leg extension, pressure on the ski, she's carving. But her inside leg didn't get that adjustment. It didn't get the steering action. So she was left in an A-frame because of a lack of steering ability of the inside leg. So one of the things we do as coaches, and one of the things we found to be really interesting, again, off snow exercises, is we give people tests to do to wake up the adductors and abductors in the legs. They control the lateral stability of the legs. Now, this is another thing that we found over 20 years of doing this sport that people don't do. And if they did do, they would have much better control of the shape in the legs, which would go on to support the legs and the knees, obviously. So when you do these tests, these ski asymmetry tests, we call it the 10-second test because the slower you do it, the more difficult it becomes. You can find that test tonight after this talk on our website. The gym sliders cost a fiver off of Amazon, and it's one of the most effective things you can ever do to reduce the risk of injury. But to be quite frank, really up your game in the sport of skiing to make your skiing better because you're controlling your lateral axis. And you're also, you're putting yourself in a safer position to ski. Ultimately, your statistical chances of injury will go down. Just as a very quick overview, inside leg, there's a really simple exercise that we use as ski coaches: hand on the inside knee. The next exercise after is hands on both knees. But anything you do with that really wakes up the awareness. And then after the hands on knees exercises, Jordan shows us an exercise lifting the inside leg off the ground. So there's no chance of having a kink in the outside leg if you're forced to lift the ski. But they're the three key points that we think will help reduce the risk of injury. Or if someone's working in this field, if you've got this knowledge base, like I say, the information's on our website. If you've got this knowledge base, it will help you, even if it's just simply a better conversation with people to talk about the subject. They'll know that quite a lot more than what could perhaps be expected. And this is what's worked with the Ski Club of Great Britain and ski boot fitters and ski instructors, across quite a wide spectrum. Rob's just showing you there where you can access the information.
The question says, how much importance do you put on thoracic spine rotation?
Thoracic spine rotation, I mean, we don't look at it so closely because most of the rotation that we do in the sport of skiing is from the legs. If you're looking at the spine, our key element really is creating angles in the body, angulation. Point number 5 here that Rob's just shown up by there, if you scroll down those icons, you can see improve leg lean. We want people to angulate. We want people to make angles on snow. Ideally, we don't want really people to be rotating their spine. Side crunches, you could think of it as, rib cage touching the pelvis. That's where we want people to make angles. Kind of what we're showing you now, but we don't really want to get rotation into the spine.
Thank you. And there's a couple of questions that came through about the passport. Do you have a snowboarding passport that you're developing, or is it just the ski video?
We don't, but I'm sure people will once the ski one has kind of come out across the industry because it's quite obvious. It's not like, again, we won't own that. We will definitely try and bring it to market because it's just as simple as filming someone on your mobile phone. But no, we don't have it on from a snowboarder's point of view.
And the one question is, do you run any courses?
We do run courses. Yeah, no, we've got courses running all the time. Right now, obviously in Verbier, it's maxed out. We run courses in November, pre-season courses. We run courses at the indoor snow domes quite often in the spring and in the autumn. And then we run a summer program as well up on the Zermatt Glacier. So we run courses all year round, and they're quite accessible, but in October as well. And perhaps we'll even come and do a talk with you guys and your network. But we go to various venues like Fortius Clinic, Equinox Gym, many ski shops around the UK, private members clubs, like 67 Mile and other places like that, and do these lectures. They usually take an hour and a half. They're very interactive. People get bums off seats, come up and do all the tests, and walk away with a program and a set of scores to actually really, reinforce the point and work off of.
Thanks, Warren. I've just asked if anyone's got any other questions before we close. What are the sliders called, please?
The sliders are actually from a manual that we wrote called Ski Technique Lab. It's available online and you can get hard copies of it as well. And the Ski Technique Lab manual is the Bible of what this whole kind of conversation's about. It expands a little bit further. It talks about leg extension and flexion, angulation, and the element of how core activation and endurance is really important in the sport of skiing. But that manual is a very interesting tool. It's also available in a PDF format, which you can do via the website as well.
And Rob, if you could pop the website link into the chat, that'd be really useful. And then there was one other question that came in a bit earlier. Based on what's been said, has a functional neurological leg length difference been considered, which can be corrected with a little repetition?
Yeah, that's an interesting point that goes to two areas. One is a lot of people's leg lengths that are tested have a hip alignment issue, which can make one leg slightly longer than the other. Some people do. I mean, I'm one of those people. I've got a 12 millimeter difference between my left and right leg. There are various ways of working around it. The one of the ways is making minor adjustments, sometimes to a ski boot, sometimes to a ski binding. Depends what level that your skiing is. Um, Another way of working on it is quite often the solution is working with how your hips can work towards being aligned. Quite often as well in these environments, you may find that there's strengths and weaknesses when tested between left and right. And once you're made aware of the differences in strengths between left and right, you can go away and work on developing strengths specifically on the side that may be weaker as well.
Thank you. That's really helpful. One more question, if you've got time. Is it okay to use a heel raise if dorsiflexion can't be increased due to injury?
Yeah, there are ways that adjusting the boot angle underneath at footbed level can help. And it's definitely worth working really closely with an expert boot fitter for that. But yeah, there are solutions in how ramp angles and even counter ramp angles can help with that.
Thank you, Warren. And there's just loads of comments in here. There's some guy, oh no, some lady, Stephanie, who wants to come and work for you.
Okay,
She
brilliant.
wants to improve her career. But yeah, there's been loads of great thanks. So I just wanted to say thank you to you and to Rob for doing a really fascinating presentation. Loads of attendees, lots of questions. But if there's anything else, I will share with you. We can share some materials afterwards. I'll discuss with Warren and Rob what they want to share. But yeah, thank you for everyone for dialing in. Thank you, Warren, for a
Pleasure.
really interesting presentation, and clearly everyone's really enjoyed it. So thank you.
Yeah, we're happy to be available ongoing, to interact with your community. If anyone's got further questions that they didn't think of tonight during the talk as well.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for joining. Till next time. Thank you.
Cool. Have a
Bye.
good winter.